Polls have opened in Chile for a presidential election set to decide the future of the country. The right-wing moves to oust Peruvian President Pedro Castillo continue. The Attorney General said his office was investigating press allegations of alleged influence peddling. Russia has officially left the Open Skies Treaty, blaming the United States for its collapse following its unilateral withdrawal in November 2020. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Chile, where polls have opened for a presidential election set to decide the future of the country. Chileans have a choice between two very different candidates this Sunday. On the one hand, Gabriel Boric, a 35-year-old congressman, lawyer and former student activist running for the Apruebo Dignidad coalition, is a candidate uniting social democrat and progressive forces of the country, seeking to ensure that Chile does not move even more to the right. On the other, the far-right candidate of the Christian Social Front coalition, Jose Antonio Cast, a 55-year-old lawyer and former congressman who's known for his praise for the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship, opposition to abortion and LGBTQI rights. 15 million Chileans are called to cast their ballots. And to discuss the presidential elections underway in Chile this Sunday, we now welcome social scientist Héctor Ríos Jara, who's joining us from London. Héctor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Héctor, Chileans are faced with a choice between two very different candidates for president this Sunday. What can you tell us about each of them and the platforms that they represent?
Well, I think it's quite clear that we are facing a contradiction between the two narratives that we will have in the years ahead of the country. On one side, Kast is representing reactionary forces, like an hyper-conservative stance that is denying the fact that Chile is in a process of transformation and modernization, is denying the fact that the country is looking for expand democracy and consolidate social and political rights, which is what had happened during the last decades. On the other side, we see the candidate Boric and the coalition of Apruebo Dignidad, which is now a larger coalition of progressive forces in the country and include the support of most of the democratic forces that have been in the process of building democracy and expand democracy over the last decade. Of course, the option of Boric is representing the most progressive program that have been presented in the last couple of years, with a huge reform in taxation and the promise to build a welfare state, probably one of the most important demands over the last decade, are fundamental to understand the uprising of 2019.
Héctor, Chile is in the process of redrafting its constitution, which is one of the outcomes of the mass mobilizations of 2019. How might this process be affected by the result of this Sunday's vote?
I think it's quite clear that Boric is part of all those social sectors that were part of the uprising and the decades of progressive activism that happened before. There is a kind of consensus that most of the progressive forces want a change in the constitution. The commitment of Gabriel Boric is basically to protect and allow the convention finish its draft and protect and support most of the activities that are happening around the convention. On the other side, Kast has expressed that although he's willing to allow the convention happen, it's clear that he was the candidate that was against the constitutional process. He has support the Pinochet constitution, and of course he is not agree with what he called the refundational stance of Chilean society. So I think although he's trying to appeal to the public as respecting the constitutional process, we cannot expect that will happen if Kast win the election.
Hector, we're seeing the return or the possible return to power of progressive forces in several Latin American countries. Beyond Chile, how could today's result impact on the wider region?
I think in the last weeks we have seen interesting support from the international community. Most of the progressive forces have declared their support to Boric. And I think the candidate also will use that as a platform to guarantee an expansion of the democratic processes in Latin America. I think although Chile has not part of the first pink tide of the 20,000, we are reaching a point when Chile now can be in the vanguard of the new wave of progressive governments in Latin America. And I think he will, Boric as a leader as well, can really represent a new program and policies that are ahead of the new cycle of progressive government. For example, advance in green energy, the transformation of the industrial policies. There are probably challenges that are still pending in most of the Latin American countries.
Hector, Chileans abroad in some countries have already begun to vote. We've seen in Australia and New Zealand that Boric took the lead. Can we expect that from Chileans voting abroad?
I think it's too early to say that. In the last election, we saw that usually the international Chilean community has favored progressive forces by a larger majority. But we need to remember that most of the people in the country will decide the destiny of this election, especially in the region of the north and the south and the rural areas, where Kass was a real surprise. So I think it's still too early. But of course, at a personal level, I hope that that trend give a positive signal and encourage most of the people to take part in today's elections.
Hector Rios Jara, who's a social scientist joining us from London, thank you so much for your time today and for offering your valuable insight into these crucial elections for Chile. Thank you.
Thank you much.
And we're going to take a very short break now, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. The right-wing moves to oust Peruvian President Pedro Castillo continue. The Attorney General said his office was investigating press allegations of alleged influence peddling. The accusations surround alleged bribes paid by a businesswoman to head of state to win tenders for public works. Prime Minister Mita Vázquez said the investigations would not be hindered, noting respect for the institutions conducting the investigations and the will to cooperate. Since taking office, President Castillo has vowed to tackle the widespread corruption among the country's traditional political elites, the very same that continue to undermine his government and seek to force him from power. Argentina's Chamber of Deputies with an opposition majority rejected the proposed 2022 budget on Friday, leaving the government of President Alberto Fernandez without a spending plan for the coming year. Our correspondent Juan Carlos Bartolota brings us the report from Buenos Aires.
132 votes garnered by the main opposition force with the support of Mario Brox. The Chamber of Deputies rejected the draft budget of 2020, prepared by the government and by the Minister of Economy, Martin Guzman, and frustrate an initiative to have it discussed again in the parliamentary committee. I would like to propose, as a way to unblock this situation, the return to the committee, the call to the minister so that in any case, those who have a certain type of proposals can make them. Then you set the date of this committee meeting, if approved of course. It seems to me that this is the way to advance on this issue. With the proposal by lawmaker Giacomo, the issue was on the way to being resolved, and at the same time, discussion on the budget was postponed until next Tuesday. But the internal difference between the opposition force resulted in the hardlines winning the day, with the proposed budget rejected.
There was arrogance on the part of the ruling party, which thought that it will be, with the passing of time, possible to bend the will of someone who would support the budget. This is the truth. When we arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning, what was revealed was the brutal internal struggle of Cambiemos bloc, because we are now here and losing our patience, because we are patiently waiting to find out whether they are hawks or pigeons. Look guys, unfortunately the issue is beyond us.
The opposition's call for voting against the budget, where the less conciliatory and more hardline position rebelled, was a speech of the president of the ruling party's parliamentary bloc, Maximo Kirchner, as the debate was closed. Having in this chamber the presence of a former vice president of the nation, a former vice chief of government until a few days ago, a former governor of the province of Buenos Aires, a former president of this chamber, it strongly caught my attention the behavior of a former minister of interior, and not from 3 governments ago, but from the government that preceded us. I am truly surprised by the behavior in view of a very serious situation that they left behind when they indebted this country with $44 billion. It is very striking. I listen to them. Learn to listen. Learn to listen. The refusal of the opposition, especially of the Together for Change coalition, which is responsible for the foreign jet debt increased by $44 million on the former president Mauricio Macri, is further evidence of how they plan to act in Congress after the recent legislative election. Now President Alberto Fernandez must govern next year with an extension of the 2021 budget and try to calm the international nerves both at the IMF and among the countries that are part of it, due to his legislative defeat in the middle of the talks to renegotiate the debt with the international organization.
Juan Carlos Bartolota, Telesur, Argentina.
A migrant caravan travelling through Mexico has decided to halt its journey north towards the United States after its members reached an agreement with authorities to regularise their situation in the country. The caravan, made up mainly of Central American asylum seekers, will be dissolved in the capital with the regularisation of some 400 people after negotiations with the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The caravan was initially made up of some 4,000 people, but given the difficulties of the dangerous journey north, many had decided to stay in Mexico given the opportunities offered for the granting of humanitarian visas and the possibility of employment opportunities. This Saturday, the Cuban Parliament begins its last sessions of the year with 4 projects based on the new constitution to feature among the debates. The 5-day session of the National Assembly of People's Power sees lawmakers meet in person for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. Among the issues to be considered are the draft laws on territorial and urban planning, the new Code of Families and the law on the military justice system, among others that have come about after the approval of the new constitution. The 2022 state budget will also be discussed, while civil servants and institutions will present annual reports. And to discuss the atmosphere on the ground as the second-round presidential elections begin in Chile, we now welcome our special correspondent, Carlos Montero. Carlos, what can you tell us about events there as Chileans take to the polls to cast their ballots for the next president?
You say in English, so far so good. Everything is going really smooth. The polls open 8 o'clock in the morning. It's really hot here in Santiago. It's 32 degrees Celsius. It's going to get higher. So they are asking people to go to vote early. And so far I see people coming to vote, very powerful people, and the candidates already vote. Let's start talking about the president, Sebastián Piñera, who voted very early this morning here in Santiago. He talked to the media after voting, and he said, tonight we are going to have an elected president. Is going to be the president of all Chileans. Why he said that? Because there are 2 candidates in this ballotage who are competing, and those candidates, they have ideas completely different about what they want to be Chile. One is from the extreme right, Jose Antonio Kast, who also is ready to vote in any moment, and the one who is representing the left is a young lawyer, 35 years old, Gabriel Boric. He is not here in Santiago. He's in Punta Arenas, in Magallanes. That's the area. He's a legislator here in Chile. He voted early, and he asked the same thing that Piñera said, people, we have to vote in peace. We don't want to have any kind of problem. Another powerful person that voted this morning is Michelle Bachelet. Michelle Bachelet, former president of Chile, the first woman who held that position in this country. She supports Boric, and she said, win, you can win anybody, but the Chilean people has to be together. Please, she asked people to go to vote so that everything is going to be peaceful, because honestly, I've been talking to different people on the street, and people are scared that something could happen today. Confrontation between people who support Boric with people who support Kast. We don't know. Let me show you very quickly how the process is, because we have only two candidates. I'm in front of one of the places where they're going to vote. It takes less than 1 minute. In this case, it's the table 75M. You vote, you have two options, Boric, Kast. Then you go to the people who are on the table. You certify the vote that this lady, she's going to vote right now. She's going to get this, and it's not going to take her, I don't know if you have time, it's not going to take her more than 35, 40 minutes. So far, so good. Everything's going okay. We are going to have a really impressive coverage, Telesur. We are different correspondents in different parts of the city, and we are going to keep informed about this election. That, like I said at the beginning, so far so good. Everything is running smoothly. I'm going back to you at the studios.
Carlos Montero joining us live from Chile. Thank you so much for that update. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Russia has officially left the Open Skies Treaty, blaming the United States for its collapse following its unilateral withdrawal in November 2020. Russia notified all related parties of its withdrawal from the treaty on June 18th, and the decision came into force 6 months later this Saturday. The treaty, which became effective in 2002, allows state parties to conduct short-notice unarmed reconnaissance flights over the territories under the sovereignty of other signatories in order to collect data on military forces and activities as a way to build confidence and familiarity. Washington officially announced its withdrawal from the accord in November 2020 under then-President Donald Trump, accusing Moscow of violating its clauses. Moscow has denied all accusations.
The destruction of the treaty on open sky will bring huge loss, which will deprive all parties of the opportunity to monitor the deployment of each other military development force. The treaty has enhanced the transparency of the development of weapons and equipment in various countries, and the transfer of troops in their own territories. After losing it, the risks in this field have obviously increased.
China has rejected the sanctions imposed by the United States against its companies in the technological sector and assured that it will take the necessary measures to defend the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese firms. We have more details in the following report by our correspondent, Iramsi Parasa.
China denounces the United States' persecution of its technological companies and assures that it will take the necessary countermeasures to protect its interests after the U.S. Treasury Department announced new sanctions against 8 Chinese technological companies for their participation in alleged violations of the Xinjiang region of China. Among the sanctioned firms are DJI, the world's largest commercial drone manufacturer, CloudWalk, NetDosa, and other companies that are now in the U.S. government's blacklist, which already includes 6 other Chinese firms. Beijing stresses that these measures violate international trade and competition law and constitute another strategy of political maneuvering by Washington to try to halt the development of the country.
China rejects the move by the United States to use the excuse of national security to exercise unjustified repression against Chinese enterprises. We will certainly take all necessary measures to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
The Chinese authorities denounced that the latest sanctions as a reflection of the U.S. government's attempts to expand its repression against China's high-tech sector and to try to undermine its progress and maintain its own global leadership in areas where it believes China has the potential to overtake it. Analysts warn of the damage of these sanctions could cause to global supply chains and other industries, and note that Washington is sanctioning Chinese companies that are at the forefront in many fields of technology and could soon catch up with or surpass those of the United States, Japan, or South Korea.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.